We admit it. 2020 has been a complete and total dumpster fire, my friends. We are stressed out. Life is crazy right now. And the fact is, women are just impacted in different ways than men. Our goal today is to talk about the landscape for women in the times of COVID, to share some techniques to get us out of the doom spiral. And of course, because this is USM Women in Leadership, we're going to have some fun. Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Corey Haskell, and I'm the Vice President of the University of Southern Maine Foundation, and I'm happy to welcome you to our very first virtual USM Women in Leadership event, Staying Sane in Messed Up Times, Part 2. And they sure are some messed up times. I just want you to know that I am here in my work from home finest today. I've got on a nice shirt and some nice jewelry, along with the yoga pants and flip-flops. So I dressed up for you. I've also got my trusty newish coworker with me of about 8 months. Her name is Shiloh. There she is, sleeping on the floor. Trusty coworker with me all the time. She's also known as Cujo by the FedEx delivery person. A couple of logistics notes before we get into our event today. First, I want you to know about closed captioning. If needed, any participant can click on the closed caption button on the Zoom toolbar right at the bottom of your screens. You can click subtitles there as well and enlarge the subtitles if you need. Second thing, any attendee is able to submit questions in the Q&A box right down at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many audience questions as possible in the last segment of our event, but we will see your questions, so feel free to submit them anytime. So today we've only got 1 hour together and it is action-packed. So before I turn it over to our moderator and our two amazing women alumni panelists, I've got to do two things. The first thing is tell you about the Promise $1 Million Challenge, and the second is I'm going to walk you through the 6 top memes of 2020, and I'm going to let you vote on the winner. So first, Promise. Many of you have already heard about USM's Promise Scholarship. It's a program that's actually at the very heart of USM's mission. Promise helps fill the financial aid gap for first-generation college students, and it also provides ongoing academic and social supports that help our students thrive here at USM. So bottom line, Promise scholars finish school with little to no debt and in 4 years. The exciting news right now about Promise is that now through December 31st, any donation to Promise will be matched by an anonymous donor of up to $1 million. So if you're looking to deepen and double your impact this holiday season, consider making a donation to the Promise Scholars Program before December 31st. I'll be sure to send all of you information on how to give in the debrief email that we always send our event registrants after the event. So be on the lookout for that. Second thing, I want to pivot to the fun. I need your help in picking the 2020 meme champion of the world. As I've said, 2020 has been a complete and total dumpster fire, and the world is rife with the memes that prove it. So you all have sent us some of your favorite memes, and today we're going to vote on them. I'll walk you through the top 6 memes that we've chosen from your submissions, and then I'm going to ask you to cast your vote for your top meme. Let's start. Let me share my screen, my friends. Alrighty, here we go, women. Number 1 meme, of course, is the Titanic theme. My plans versus 2020, the big iceberg that was 2020. Number 1. Number 2 is one that is especially resonant to me. Who knew that the hardest part of being an adult is figuring out what to cook for dinner every single night for the rest of your life until you die? Yes, that is my life these days, friends. Adult dinner planning. Meme number 3. Kids in 2055, when they see that there's a different history unit for every single week of 2020, I think you probably feel like that if you're watching the news at all. Like, I've never seen it like this ever. So, school in 2055, number 3. Meme number 4, also a good one, today's homeschool lesson, fractions. For those of you that like wine, I mean, that could be coffee, but let's face it, it's probably wine. Meme number 5, a little Halloween, bringing it back to October, the Zoom jack-o'-lantern. And then finally, meme number 6 is school in 2020. Starting school in person, starting school online, homeschooling. All right. So if I could have my friend Zach, the voice of God, put up the poll. Women, vote on your favorite. What's your best meme of 2020? Is it the Titanic? Is it adult dinner planning? Is it school in 2055? Is it fractions? Is it the Zoom jack-o'-lantern? Or is it number 6, school in 2020? All right. Well, cast your vote 1 through 6. At the end of this event, I'm going to announce the 2020 meme champ. And excitingly, I'm also going to pull 2 door prize winners of a highly coveted USM Husky Snuggle Pack. So more on that later. Now, lady friends, it is time to dig into these messed up times and figure out how to stay out of the doom zone. Here to help is my partner in crime and our moderator, President and CEO of the USM Foundation, Ainsley Wallace.
Thanks, Corey. And hi, everyone. It's great to see a lot of friends and a lot of new faces as part of our first virtual event. Thanks everyone for being with us today. And we know that this year has had an element of a shared context where we all have the sense of overwhelm and profound stress, but also it's been highly personal. Today, we're really lucky to have 2 women alumnae and faculty members with us to help us make sense of what we're experiencing together and to find individual ways that we can, as Corey said, come out of the doom spiral. We often say that USM alums are everywhere and they're amazing, and these 2 women are definitely the embodiment of that. So I'm going to introduce both of them. Dr. Heather Shattuck-Heidorn, class of 2009, is an assistant professor of women and gender studies at USM, and she's the co-founder and assistant director of the Harvard GenderSci Lab. She recently co-authored an opinion piece in the New York Times that we will send to you as part of our follow-up from this event, looking at what's really behind the gender gap in COVID-19 deaths. Heather's going to walk us through the national landscape for women during this pandemic. Then secondly, we're going to talk to Dr. Marianne Peabody, class of 2002, who's an associate professor and chair of social and behavioral sciences here at USM. Marianne's an internationally recognized play therapist and certified Lego Serious Play facilitator who can help us stay out of that dreaded doom spiral by focusing on strategies to shore up optimism, resilience, and happiness. And she's the one who's going to talk to us about the science behind play that's critical to our emotional well-being. Before we begin, I just want to reiterate what Corey said, that you can submit questions for our panelists at any time using the Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll speak to those at the end of the session. So first, I want to invite Heather to join us in conversation about the landscape for women. So welcome, Heather.
Hi, Ainsley. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're so excited that you're here with us. And so let's dig right into today's topic. We were talking about how there was a recent New York Times article that reported that the pandemic will take women in the workplace back 10 years. Can you talk about what they're speaking to? And, what does that mean?
Yeah, no problem. I think, and I think a lot of people will recognize this from their own lives or people that they know. So in the United States, women had pre-existing disparities in the workforce, especially mothers. So we know that, we have a lack of early childhood education programs that are affordable and easy to access in this country. And we already saw in the US that women were sacrificing their careers, choosing to stay home when their kids were young, or looking for more flexible jobs, taking pay cuts in order to provide that social support within the family. And the pandemic came along and, of course, just closed all the schools, eliminated all sorts of social support that people were relying on. And that really exploited fractures that already existed within care choices that families had. So since the pandemic, we know that women are much more likely to have left their jobs. They're much more likely to have taken different positions with more flexibility but less pay. And they have assumed the bulk of the responsibility for education in the home, as well as the increased levels of like family decision making around health, increased levels of housework, as we probably have all noticed, being home all day.
Yeah, and so that brings up a great question that we want to ask our attendees. And Zach, if you can pop up the question, we want to know, has the pandemic affected your ability to engage with your own work? A lot, a little, or not at all? And while we give people the chance to answer that, Heather, maybe you can talk about your own experience. You have 2 kids at home and one coming very soon on the way. And
Yeah.
so what's your experience personally?
Yeah, so, last March, my experience was like many other people's, I think, in that I suddenly found myself home with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I was working full time. I was homeschooling them all of a sudden. And my husband was still going out every day. He's an essential worker who works outside the home. And it did not go well, I think. And, this summer, I decided that we couldn't do that again, and that I would pull the kids out if I had to take care of them completely. Luckily, my husband was able to take an evening shift and my mother stepped in. And so I've been able to work during the day without the kids. But I really found that combining working at home during the day with full-time childcare and remote learning for young children was just impossible.
Well, and that's so interesting because, and Zach, maybe you can pop up the results for us, because you're not exactly a slouch. You're, you've studied at Harvard, you're PhD educated. And it looks like that the majority of people have experienced this a little or a lot. And is it your experience and what you see in the research that this has affected women across educational spectrums?
Yes, I definitely think so. I know in academia, there's been a lot of pieces around how much academics are struggling at these times. We know that women are publishing much fewer papers. There's a cliff of papers published by women in March, where all of a sudden men were continuing to submit work and women just stopped submitting papers to journals. But I think in some ways, academics are often pretty privileged in these conversations. We can work from home. Usually our jobs have been secure. And the women that I think are most impacted are women of lower socioeconomic classes who might not have the ability to work from home and who are continuing to have to leave the house and face exposure risks, and then also are faced with this childcare dilemma.
Yeah, and so actually that brings up our second poll, which is really about to what extent people are experiencing the childcare dilemma. And so, Zach, and we know that this question is such a driver behind women in the workplace and their struggles. Could you pull up the second poll? Because we'd like to know, have you or someone you know been significantly impacted by a lack of childcare during the pandemic? And I know that very recently, my toddler, Ada, was exposed to a kid with asymptomatic COVID, and so was suddenly thrust back home for 2 weeks. And we thought that we were doing well, but we didn't realize that we were just hanging on by a thread, and that thread was called full-time childcare. And that once that was taken away, it felt all of a sudden like we were back in the hardest parts of March and April. And so how does that play for women, not just I'm a very privileged white woman. How does that play with some of the compounding factors that we're so aware of in 2020 around race, socioeconomic class?
Yeah. Well, what we know for sure is that these factors, these social systems that we have already baked into our society around race, racism, white privilege in terms of socioeconomic status and access to good jobs, these things have been really compounded by the pandemic. So on average, white families are much more able to work at home right now. Black workers, Latinx workers, immigrant workers have been much more likely to be in the types of industries that you can't work from home. Oftentimes these industries also face high risk of exposure too. So for instance, like all the outbreaks that we saw in the meatpacking plants throughout the year, a lot of those jobs are held by immigrant men or by Black workers within the South. Black women are disproportionately represented across the healthcare industry. So from nurses to CNAs to home health aides to the people in the nursing homes, the workers that you find are disproportionately going to be Black women. And those are jobs that face high risks of exposure. So you have what we've seen in the United States is that overall, minorities are more likely to have increased risks of COVID contraction and mortality rates. And this is especially stark for the African-American communities and for the immigrant communities. And this is partly due to these exposure risks that go along with occupation and the ability to safely socially distance right now. And then also partly related to pre-existing health disparities within the US around access to healthcare, chronic conditions, things like that. And of course, if you have to leave to go to work every day, then and if you're a family that is really dependent on two incomes to support the family, I think many upper or middle class families can solve this problem of childcare right now by reducing one of the incomes and taking that financial hit. But there's families that really just can't do that, and they might have only one income earner, or they have two lower wage workers. And for these families, this problem of childcare is really critical.
Yeah, and it just seems like systemic issue upon systemic issue. And Zach, could you pull up the results from our childcare poll? Yeah, so Heather, it sounds like that these poll results don't surprise you, that the vast majority of people have been impacted or know someone who has.
Yeah, I mean, I think the childcare, one of the interesting things is how we're prioritizing childcare in the country. So New York, I think yesterday, New York City's schools closed down again, and they did it with 1 day of notice. And what I have found interesting is that they've chosen to close the schools, but keep the bars and restaurants open. And I think when we make, of course, we need to align ourselves with the safety recommendations of the public health professionals and the epidemiologists. But at the same time, when we make decisions within our country and our society around what aspects of society we want to keep, those decisions have like very real effects in people's lives. And, taking away childcare, we know hurts women.
Yeah, and already it feels like that 2020 is showing us that the childcare plan in this country is women, like that women will figure it out. So one of the questions that a participant submitted is asking like, okay, so then what do we do? How do we minimize gender inequities that are exacerbated by the pandemic? How do women make advances in this sort of perfect storm of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because a lot of these issues are structural or systemic issues. And I think in the US, we tend to want to figure out like individual level solutions. Like I'm going to 15 minutes of meditation my way into handling the stress of these times. And that's just really inadequate to face. We already had structural issues around maternity leave, early childhood care in this country that were the solution to it that we have devised is that women pick up that slack. So we have these like greater systemic problems to address. And I guess the solution long term is to address those problems. And in the immediate, I would hope that people that had power within their own lives, like if you're an employer and you have 20 employees or something, that we start considering how can I recognize like the reality of what my workers are going through right now and reduce workload or try to accommodate it better.
That's great. And so another question that's been asked is about another compounding factor, and that's about domestic violence and particularly violence against women. And so what have you seen in the literature about what indications are there about the trends in domestic violence in the pandemic?
Yeah, we know that domestic violence has gone way up almost everywhere. So we know that domestic violence goes up when people are stressed, when they're financially insecure. And this, of course, the pandemic has brought all of that. It's also brought the elimination of ways that people would normally escape domestic violence. The Muskie School is doing some really nice work on this, and so is one of the WGS professors, Julianne Siegfried.
And WGS is, for those people following along at home.
Yeah. Yes. But I know that across the world, I'm part of a gender and COVID-19 working group. That's an international working group that meets monthly and has a lot of chit chat and chatter. And a lot of people are working on this issue. It's true around the world. When the lockdowns happened, domestic violence went up.
Wow. And so if we, again, it feels like that this is the challenge of this conversation, right, Heather, that I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. And I think that the natural question that we ask is like, okay, so then what can women do? But here's the challenge of, we're asking, how do women express their own individual actions for issues that are really systemic?
Yeah.
So how do you suggest, for those of us who now have some more information, that we're not imagining this, that we're experiencing a real social phenomena, what do you suggest that we do in light of all of this?
I think, yeah, go ahead.
We can, clearly meditating for 15 minutes is maybe nice, but maybe not the answer for us.
Yeah, I know, it's hard. And even, for me, I have a situation like in my relationship where my husband does 50% easy or more of the things around the house and stuff. But I recognize, part of the reason that domestic violence has gone up and that it's difficult to address is that as women lose their jobs and as women are cut off from their social supports by the pandemic, they become more vulnerable and they become less able to negotiate for more within the house, less able to have financial freedom or the ability even to leave a situation. So I want to stay aware that people's options can be really limited right now. For women like me, I think, who have a lot of freedom right now, I think the thing that has been helpful is to give myself a break. One of my children is falling behind in school, as an example, and his teacher said he's really not at grade level. He's not doing well with remote schooling. He doesn't do well with the iPad. He's 7. It's very distracting. And I can get caught up in a lot of guilt and I'm not doing enough. And I think, trying to let go of all those internal expectations that we're going to continue to be perfect in every area. But for people that are more vulnerable right now, I think, doing whatever we can locally to continue to be part of our community, so that we can, still volunteer at food pantries, still make sure that domestic violence hotline stays open and that people are responding. And then when this is over, because it will eventually be over, we need to keep that commitment to building the social supports that are necessary so that we don't end up in positions like this as a society.
Yeah, and it's so hard right now in this moment that feels endless to be taking the long view. And so it sounds like that you're encouraging us to continue to look not just at how we take care of ourselves now, but how we really build the society that we want to live in long term.
Yes, yeah, and give ourselves a break. This is a long taxing period, and I don't think we're going to be able to keep all the balls in the air. And in some ways, I think the biggest challenge is to figure out a way to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's so wise. And maybe that's a place where that meditation that you were alluding to can help us, that we need to find some internal resources to be able to let some things go. So there's a lot of interest in what other things are coming up in your COVID research group. And so is there anything else that you would just like to say to people that you think they might find interesting about what we're learning around COVID and gender?
Well, I think some of the most interesting stuff is that we had a suspicion. So men have higher rates of mortality from COVID. And there's been a suspicion that this is probably not as strongly sex linked as it is gender linked. And there's new data coming out that indeed men are much less likely to wear masks than women, and that men who ascribe to more masculine ideals are even less likely to wear masks. So from prior research in infectious disease, we know that masculinity norms influence people's health. And it looks like this is also true with COVID-19. So it's not our imagination. Dudes really are less likely to wear masks. I'm personally just interested in how people's ideas around gender influence their behavior, and then that influences their health.
Okay, so so I think that we just got some interesting more questions that we're going to need to ask you in the final Q&A segment. But thanks for giving us such a great overview of the landscape and some real guidance about how to act on a macro as well as a micro level. So we'll bring you back at the end. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Bye.
Bye. Okay, now we're going to welcome our certified play therapist, Dr. Marianne Peabody. Come on down, Marianne. It's so great to have you with us. And so we've just been exploring, as you know, with Heather, the sort of the really heavy impact of the pandemic on the world, on women, and on our psyches. And I'm excited to talk to you because what I've learned in talking to you thus far is that there are ways to find moments of happiness and optimism amid stress and anxiety, and that there's a real science in the field of play. And so can you give us some overall grounding, Marianne? What does our audience need to know about play and its therapeutic power in our lives?
Great. Well, thanks. Welcome everybody to my section of it. And as I was sitting here thinking about the systemic pieces, and as Heather was ending and you were talking, I was like, there is an individual piece that goes to this, because that is, we each have to figure this out in this pandemic. One of the things I wanted to sort of share a little bit about me is, although I am an alumni, most of my greatest clinical training actually came from USM. So I'm pretty proud of that. I had training at other universities, but it really, when people ask me, my best clinical training came from USM as a play therapist. So
I love that.
Yeah, as a therapist, even though I am in academics now, I continue to be a therapist. And the reason I'm sort of speaking about that, and probably why you asked me to do this, is, my life has been about listening to hard stuff. And it has been about stress and trauma and uncertainty. And people come to therapists to say, help, I'm stuck. I need to have, some way of shifting. And my specialty area, interestingly, as you said, and what I'm most recognized for, both in the field, in training, and my publications, is play therapy. So I take play actually pretty seriously. And it's not the put the clown nose on and that kind of thing, but there really is a paradox. And as you said, there's this philosophy and a whole science around play and positive emotions and happiness. And just a little bit, if you're interested, Harvard, back to Heather, is actually putting on for free their Science of Happiness course during the pandemic. So people can download that and sign up for that and take a course.
Oh, that's great. We'll make sure to get that link from you, Marianne, and include that for participants after the session.
Great. So I think play is often associated just with children. And children are natural players. Anyone who has children in their lives, and I'm a grandparent now, so I'm getting to relive this over again, is yes, children are natural players, but my definition of play goes beyond just children. So we may call it something different as we mature. It might be recreation, it might be leisure, it might be sports, it might be that 15 minutes of meditation, but play really has some therapeutic value to it, and it can facilitate communication. When you and I are playing and it's humorous and that kind of thing, those endorphins come up, the neurotransmitters in our brain kick in. And that is, I teach a whole class at USM called the Interpersonal Neurobiology of Play. So there is really a science behind this. It kicks in the dopamine transmitter. And there are other transmitters, but dopamine is the transmitter in our brain that is about joy, and it's about pleasure. And it's also about creativity. And, the School of Business may call it creativity, or our leadership folks may call it creativity. I call it fun, and I call it play. And those literatures do go back and forth. But when dopamine kicks in, we also have more enhanced attention. We also have the ability to shift mentally. And there's also a piece of resiliency. So if you think about the last 9 months, we've had to shift mentally. I mean, depending, as Heather commented, depending how this impacted you, play and fun may be the furthest thing from your mind. And we can talk a little bit about that. But there is something about finding joy. And you mentioned I'm a Lego Serious Play facilitator, which, yes, indeed, that's actually a thing. And I actually use this with corporations, and I use it with nonprofits, and I certainly use it in my work with students. So I'm also extremely interested in playful when I teach. And so part of that is because objects and props also kick in and help with learning. So I'm not going to get to do Lego Serious Play with you guys, but I am going to bring a prop related to a positive emotion that I want to talk about. So I'm going to hold this up, and I hope it says joy to you. Does it?
It does.
Okay.
That's what it says to me. So I'm assuming that's what it says to everybody.
I say that because in screens, sometimes it's a different mirror, So I'm going to just hold this up for a minute because I want to do a play on words in a minute with you. So I'm going to.
So Marianne, while you have that up, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So you were talking earlier about how play is not just about red noses, and how play, is personal, and that it depends on the context. Maybe in some cases we're calling it fun, in some places we're calling it creativity. How can you speak more to that? And how do we identify what play is to us, and where we can tap into that, the good stuff that creates the dopamine release and all of that?
Yeah. Well, one of the greatest examples, I think, if I said to you, Ainsley, let's hang out, if we could hang out, but Ainsley, let's hang out and we're going to go do karaoke. What's your emotion related to that?
Yeah, and so I have voice issues. So I used to love karaoke, but it actually makes my chest tighten now. So that's probably not the thing for me.
Right. So when we choose play, it's very personal. Karaoke would be frightening, would be, for some people, would be like, are you kidding? That's the worst idea. I don't want to do that. You watch people react to going on a roller coaster, which is supposed to be fun and amusement parks and that. But for some, that's absolutely the worst kind of play. And so play is extremely personal, and it's contextual. And what I mean by that is, and both you and Heather alluded to this, if I've lost my job through this pandemic, if I've lost insurance and I'm homeschooling and I don't have a support system, my ability and my feelings surrounded this are going to be far from joyful. They're going to be much more intense. Where if I have privilege and a social support around me, and I'm introverted and don't want to talk to people, I'm fine just sitting at home working remotely, that is going to be a whole different experience of joy.
Yeah, so actually that brings up another interesting conversation that we started to have previously about the idea of toxic positivity. It seems like to me, well, can you talk about what that is?
Yes, toxic positivity. I think maybe most of us have someone in our lives, or maybe don't, but that it just seems to be always optimistic. I mean, just like sugary sweet optimistic. And I am concerned about that, both at a personal level, and I'm also concerned at like agencies or institutional kind of levels, because, and I'll give two examples. I am actually optimistic by nature, but if there's anyone on our 100 participants, and I'm guessing there is, that knows me a little, more closely, they know that there are waves, there are ebbs and flows. And that's what I think these positive emotions and joy is about. You can't be joyful all the time. You can't be optimistic all the time. If you are, then you're really shoving down some of these difficult emotions. And
so you're talking about like that friend who, as soon as we start to talk about some of the heavy things that Heather brought up, says, but anything that doesn't kill you is going to make you stronger, and or posts a meme on on Facebook about like it's always darkest before the dawn, and that sort of that when we don't allow ourselves to experience authentic human emotions and just sort of spiritually bypass it, or that can actually be toxic for our well-being.
Yes, and exactly, we just need to experience it all. Like these. Some of us are going to be more optimistic than others, but to be okay, to be real and authentic and say, this really is hard. I am overwhelmed. How do you do this role? And to be okay. I kind of feel like what Heather said towards the end is so right on. There's going to be days we aren't as joyful. We aren't full of positive emotions, and to give ourselves a break, because there may be other days we can bring that up, but to just always see things, super rosy, I think is hard. And sometimes our agencies do that too, our workplaces. And a great example is someone sent me an email the other day that said, it wasn't related to USM, but it was in a workplace outside. And they just said we should have a yoga class. And then they said within the very next half hour after the yoga class, we were meeting about the lack of resources. And so it was, those sort of incongruent messages.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite memes of 2020, the different variations on people saying, if your email starts, I hope this finds you well. It's 2020. You can guess that your email does not find me well. So Marianne, unfortunately, I think we need to move on a little bit. And I am both excited and a little bit nervous because you want to do an activity that normally we would be doing with our whole audience, but because of the Zoom environment, we're doing just you and me, right?
Exactly. So
all right.
I'll introduce it if you don't mind.
Please bring it on.
We haven't even scripted this, so this is really real, and this is honest. We haven't scripted what you're going to say. What I did ask Ainsley to do to illustrate some of just the emotions is to pick 3 objects. Then the first one that would represent the positive, the joyful, the amazing kind of things, if there are, that she has experienced throughout the pandemic. The second object would be just, conversely that, the difficult things. What has been awful? What has been, concerning for you? And the third one, something that was surprisingly ordinary, kind of the mundane, the everyday. So what do you have for us?
Okay, so Marianne, first for my joyful object, this is the very adorable boot of my 21-month-old daughter, Ada Celine. And because of the pandemic and being home, I've gotten to have so much more integration between my work and my life. And I've gotten to have these precious moments like being with Ada when she started really walking for the first time. And earlier this week, when she was home because she had to quarantine, feeling both stress about work, but then going outside and watching her joy in splashing in a puddle.
Yeah. There is nothing like a 2-year-old for joy.
Oh my gosh, it's uncanny. So do you want me to share my next item?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here is my negative experience. This is the first mask that someone gave me that they made back in March, and it is uncomfortable. It doesn't fit well around my ears. It's not breathable. And for me, it represents a lot of the transitions in this, the social transitions in the pandemic for someone who's really relational and extroverted like me. It's felt uncomfortable and hard to breathe.
Mm-hmm. So as you explain that, you know, the mask is such a representation of this inability sometimes for us to breathe, that do that breathing, that in and out, that I love the word of itchiness, because I think itchiness is a great descriptor for these awful, concerning kind of things that each of us are living with every single day. So
then here's my mundane item. This is my spatula, which has gotten more use over the last 7 months than ever before, because I've never cooked so many freaking meals at home in my life.
Yeah. So I've asked you to do those 3 because I think that it's these everyday moments, these moments that are just really key to finding that positiveness, that joy, that part in there. So I wanted to do 2 things before we turn it back, I think, to overall questions.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring back, if you recall, I started with the emotion of joy. And I want to bring back this little play on words. Okay. So what do you see here? What word is coming up here?
Yeah, now I see you.
Okay. The play on words is joy, that I showed you first, is exactly the mirror piece of you if I add something to it. Okay. So it's in the adding, and this is just an object, an image that I hope will stay with the audience. I had to add something to it. I had to actually do something. You can leave here knowing all the knowledge about positive emotions. You can leave with knowing the joy and the science, but unless you actually implement it, if you actually think of something each day, and it doesn't have to be big, but you actually call up someone that you know gives you good emotions when you're maybe feeling down. If you do those sort of steps, I think it's really important. And I wanted to end with a very special poem, if you don't mind, that I'd like.
I love that.
This is a poem that you can also find very easily by L.R. Nost. And it says, life is amazing. And then it's awful. And then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and it's mundane and it's routine. So breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living. Heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful.
Wow. I'm just pausing so that we can let that sink in. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Marianne. And then now you're going to stick around and we're going to welcome back Heather into our virtual chat room. Welcome back, Heather. So, so we have a number of questions from the audience that I can't wait to hear your answers around. So the first, there are a couple of questions around some sort of how-tos, and maybe both of you would have some thoughts on this. So there's a sort of the how-to at home, like how do we talk to our spouses about, or our partners or our roommates about doing more of the work so that we're not taking on excess burden. And then similarly, how then at work, how do we talk to our employers? So in a way to help them understand our predicaments at home, how do we approach our bosses?
Well, I can start, and Heather certainly jump in. Or I I believe sometimes timing about difficult conversations, we have to really plan those out if we can. I think sometimes when we're very stressed, whoever walks in the door gets it, and it's a dump. And I really think sometimes saying, I really need to talk tonight. I'm just, really need to have you listen to what I'm feeling. Again, finding those moments that are very well planned. Yeah. And then to keep going back, we can talk, but if it doesn't change something, we have to go back to those conversations.
That's great. Heather, do you have anything that you would add to that?
Well, this is not my area of expertise per se, but I do think that oftentimes I think that women will let things build up and won't say something, and then we'll have that sort of dump that Marianne describes. And I think finding ways to communicate all along, and then also there's good evidence that women do a lot of invisible labor within the home. We do a lot of care work. We do a lot of thinking about things, scheduling things. Just in the spring, we had 8 different logins and apps for my son's, for one child's remote schooling. And all of that was invisible to my husband.
Yeah.
So I think making really clear the work that we're doing, that is that sort of household management, organizational work, and asking really explicitly for help with these sort of invisible, mundane, monotonous, repeat tasks is good.
That's great. That's really helpful. And so, Heather, maybe you can start with this next question. Someone asks that many people have gone from down to downright depressed during the pandemic. How do you guard against it or recognize it? And where do people go to find resources for support?
I'm gonna duck out of the resources for support because it's really not I don't know what the best options for that locally are. I think for me, really recognizing how I can have, I loved the poem that Marianne read. I think recognizing I had a set routine before the pandemic that helped me feel healthy and sane and like myself. And a lot of that routine got disrupted. So how do I replace it with things that can help me a little bit? One of the things I've done, and this is really super specific, but I have done a movie watching night online with a group of, with an online network of scientist friends on Twitter. And all we do is just turn the movie on at the same time on Thursday night, and we watch some stupid movie together like Jaws. And then we tweet jokes about the movie. It's so little. It's
hey Heather, that's play.
Yeah, but it makes me feel like I'm connected to a group of people, and we're cracking jokes with each other. And so I think any bit of normalcy, if your normalcy was having a cup of coffee by yourself in the morning, but now the kids are always there, finding a way to reclaim a tiny bit of space to help yourself have those routines that kept us from getting down before.
Oh, I love that. That's so helpful. And Marianne, the 2 questions for you. First, several people have asked, can you give us the name of the poem and the poet again? And then secondly, connected to this, where's an easy place to start play during these times that can feel really heavy?
The easiest is just we're thinking, I think Thanksgiving brings up a lot of gratitude kind of feelings. And a lot of folks, I think, do gratitude, have gratitude journals and that kind of thing. But I really think if you need to start, you need to just focus on what gives you joy. And it may be as simple as, not reading your work email when you're still in bed first thing in the morning. Get up and have that moment of coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, and that I just love that. But I've added my breathing to that. So I hold it, and then I take, those deep breaths, which I've had to learn breathing all my life. It's no wonder they teach us breathing to have childbirth, breathing is so important, but it doesn't have to be big things. Those little moments. Start with something that gives you joy which is so personal. And then maybe remind yourself through the day, set a timer, do something that's that practice piece. And the author of the poem is L.R., and those are her initials, Noist, K-N-O-S-T.
Great. And we'll send that out as part of our follow-up materials too. So we have time, I think, just for one more question. And so we'll end on kind of a light note. We would love to know, what are you reading or watching right now that helps to lift your spirits?
I've been watching just a lot of garbage TV. I tend to watch TV and read to turn my brain off. And so I have burned through several series. I'm watching one right now. I'm watching that Afterlife series or something like that on Amazon Prime. That's just very silly, and doing the same thing with books. I was recently reading Chuck Wendig's The Wanderers, which is actually about a pandemic during a time of political unrest in North America.
Too soon, Heather.
Not
Too
as
soon.
relaxing as I thought.
And then any good movies that you've watched other than Jaws with your Thursday night group?
The Witches.
That's
the
great.
Old Witches, and I want to see the new one too with my kids.
What about you, Marianne? What are you reading or watching that's lifting your spirits?
My adult son said to me, I think you won't really like these shows, but I think you should watch them. So I have been binge watching, which is remarkable, Schitt's Creek and New Girl, which is so totally not me, but I'm so like whatever, and that's been interesting. And in response to what I've been reading, and this goes back to what I think Heather spoke about, is give yourself a break. I cannot read for pleasure right now, or my attention is so limited. Because first off, I have to read a lot in my work, but secondly, I'm tired when I go to bed. So like I read something just very short. A magazine just gives me what I need.
What type of magazines are you reading?
Oh, mostly this is going to make you laugh, because it's usually my professional play therapy magazines that I can't get to in there. So.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much. And people have asked that we include some resources from you in our debrief email after the fact. So we'll make sure that the nuggets that you've shared get out to everyone who's registered for the event. So really, thank you again, Marianne and Heather. Have a great Thanksgiving. And Heather, I know soon you're going to be welcoming baby number 3. So we wish you the best with that transition too.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And Marianne, it was great to hear about your work.
Yes. Vice versa. Thank you all, and have a wonderful holidays coming up, full of joy.
It's great. And now I'll welcome back our ringleader, my partner in crime, Corey Haskell.
Hey, how are you? That was so amazing.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I really am so proud to have 2 such accomplished USM women alums here at USM, and willing to share in a speed round some of the work that is so important right now. So thanks to Marianne and Heather. They are both amazing. And the other thing I wanted to say is in the Q&A, we had lots of great questions from our event attendees. And there was one comment, it wasn't actually a question, but I did want to just say we saw it. One of our attendees said she's got a 20-year-old at home, and that it's really hard for older young people during the pandemic too. And I just wanted to say that I also am feeling that. I've got a 23-year-old who just graduated from college in June, and a 20-year-old who was a freshman in college, now a sophomore, and they both came home from college in their freshman and senior years last March, and not where they wanted to be right now. And I'm really feeling for our attendee. I'm sure there's a lot of stress for them and their family and for all young people. So anyway, we're thinking of you. So we've got two things to do before we shut this event down. The first thing is we are going to pull a door prize winner or two for the Husky Snuggle Pack. So
Corey, what is a Husky Snuggle Pack?
I'm glad that you asked that, Ainsley. For those of you that don't know what a Husky Snuggle Pack is, we developed this early on for Husky Honeys, who are our double alumni couples. And then we were like, hey, it can be for singles too. So our lady USM women alums, we're going to send you a Husky Snuggle Pack, the winner here, 2 tumblers. You can fill it with wine. You can fill it with coffee. You can fill it with whatever you want, but they're USM branded, one nice teal, one nice navy. So you can have hot cocoa and a USM Husky fleece blanket. There is Champ, our little buddy, USM branded.
The blanket made for 2.
Blanket made for 2.
The fire pit.
That's right. Fire pit, hot tub, outside in the car because your heat gets shut off. That's not even fun to like joke about, but there it is. We're going to send 2 of these out and announce that. Do you know the winners, Ainsley?
Yeah, I think that I was just informed of the winners. And so winner number 1 is number 113, Pam Thompson.
All right,
and
Pam.
Winner number 2 is number 46, Audra Gordon. Yay! This is where, if we were all together, people would be clapping loudly because this is the best swag that we have. It's our favorite swag anyway.
All right. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. What is the best meme of 2020? So let's just go through them one more time so we can relive this fun stuff. This was number 6, school in 2020. I'll go backwards. Number 5, back in the day of Halloween, the Zoom jack-o'-lantern. Number 4, I gotta say, I think this might be my personal favorite. Today's homeschool lesson, fractions. Number 3, kids in 2055. Number 2, adult dinner planning. And then number 1, the Titanic, the year that was 2020. So if I could ask Zach, our trusty tech man. Ooh, fractions. Okay, fractions is the winner. 31%. The Titanic is a close second at 22%. Then the adult dinner planning is 18%. And then school in 2055 is number 4 at 12%. So the winner is the fractions lessons. I can tell we've got a bunch of wine lovers out there in our women in leadership land. Awesome. All right, the 2020 meme champ. So let me wrap up by just letting you all know that we're going to send a debrief email to everyone who registered for the event. That's going to include information about how to give and support the Promise Scholar and help us meet the $1 Million Challenge by the end of this year. Link to Heather Shattuck-Heidorn's New York Times opinion piece from last June. She is an amazing and esteemed alumna. And we're going to send you some other reading about this really important issue because we certainly can't cover a lot of ground in an hour. We're going to send you some recommended reading and digital resources from Heather and Marianne. And we're also going to send you a link to today's webinar. We'll have a recording and Marianne's great poem. Ainsley, what did I forget?
No, I think that was it, but we can probably include some of Heather and Marianne's favorite binge watching TV shows and books right now in magazines.
You know, we can, and maybe some of our own too. I heard there's a new season of The Crown. I'm just saying. And because 2020 is such a dumpster fire, we know there's only one way to go, and that is up. 2021 is looking up, my friends. So USM Women in Leadership, we'll see you in 2021. Thanks so much for being with us. Have a wonderful, blessed Thanksgiving and holiday season. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll look forward to being with you again soon.
Great to be with you all.